Poke the Bear is brought to you by Prize Picks.
And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 383, part of the CLNS Media Network. If you have time, please subscribe to our Bruins Ringside YouTube channel, where we have pretty much daily content between Poke the Bear, Bruins Beat with Evan Marinofski, Pucks with Haggs. We have you covered every step of the way this hockey season. So follow along with us over at YouTube. And if you don't like YouTube, you can subscribe and follow along over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your hockey podcasts. This episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks, the best way to win cash this football season. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. My name is Conor Ryan, and we're joined once again by the esteemed, the ever-knowledgeable Ty Anderson of 98.5 The Sports Hub. Ty, how you doing?
How are we doing this morning? What is going on?
Pretty good win for the Bruins on Thursday night, Ty. You look at a team that needed a get-right game after that loss in Detroit, and the St. Louis Blues presented that because, my God, that team is bad. Not the Patriots. The Bruins, the Boston Bruins, the team we're talking about on this podcast. They took advantage, beat the Blues 5-2 on Thursday night at TD Garden. Much like the Patriots against the Jets, that game was pretty much over with like 30+ minutes to go. Bruins took care of business in this one, scored 5 goals against Jordan Binnington. Ty, what was your main takeaway from a much-needed win for the Bruins?
This team continues to bounce back. Really, since ending that 6-game losing streak back in October, they are now 6-1 in games immediately following a loss, which is confirmation of things that your eyes are telling you, right? Like, this team listens to Marco Sturm. They understand his messaging and they understand his direction that he wants to go, and they're responding. And that I think it's a big takeaway on a night where, you know, Jim Montgomery comes to town and you saw what this team was a year ago and how they couldn't respond. You know, losses would pile up. It felt like the Bruins kept having just the absolute worst loss after worst loss every time you thought it couldn't get any lower, you know, like it would somehow get lower. And I think that's the biggest difference that it kind of stuck out. Maybe it stuck out to me because it was Montgomery back in town with St. Louis, but just again, the way this team responds after losing games, like that's a a calling card of a good team. I'm not saying the Bruins are going to be an elite team. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but when you bounce back after losing games and you do have that kind of response, like, you're going to be in the hunt, you're going to be in the race. And so long as that remains a part of their game, they're going to be better than perhaps we think they should be or think they can be, because that's a mental thing and that's important. And I think you saw it again in another way on Thursday night.
Yeah, for sure. And we will definitely be talking more about Jim Montgomery later on in this podcast, as far as his eventful 2+ years here in Boston. But just looking at this game, especially, yeah, as far as like the bounce back effort and buying in, one thing that Marco Sturm said is that an emphasis was them starting off pretty strong. And you look at this team, and that hasn't been the case at times this year. They end up putting up a bunch of shots against Binnington early on, take a 2-0 lead. And you have a lot of guys pulling on the rope, right? I think that's kind of been the encouraging thing. It's not just this game, but even look at the last game against Detroit, a game you come up short, but you have Alex Steeves, who now apparently is a 20-goal guy, cashing in. You've got like Husandinov scores on Tuesday against Detroit. And this is a game too on Thursday where, after kind of a slow start for that Zacha, Arvidsson, Middlestat line, they really kind of cash in this time around where guys are getting healthy. You got Zacha gets 2 goals. Arvidsson has a rocket to score his first goal since coming back. This team desperately needs David Pastrnak back. Not saying it, not saying anything like that, but at least in the aggregate for right now, they are landing enough punches offensively that's at least keeping this team competitive, which is encouraging to see. And I think a lot of that has to be credited to a guy like Alex Steeves, who worked his ass off, and now he's getting rewarded for it in Marco Sturm's system.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's another example of a guy coming up, giving you something, and you're a better team for it. I think that's, like, we've done podcasts and we've done episodes where, like, we've talked about the Bruins not bringing up some of the younger players, whether that's like Fabian Lysell or Matt Poitras. And I know fans have wanted it, but if they keep bringing up guys who, when they come up here, are productive and are giving you more than, in theory, those guys would give you or have given you in the past, like, it's kind of hard to criticize them. Like I want to see Fabian Lysell up here, but if you bring up a guy like Alex Steeves and he has 8 goals or 7 goals, whatever, in 14 games, it's like, okay, or 12 games, it's like, all right, well, maybe you don't need him as much as I thought you did, because he's producing and he's producing in a way that we haven't seen from those guys before, right? And so this is where I feel like they deserve some credit, as a coaching staff, as a management team, where they're identifying the right guys right now to bring up, and those guys are being put in spots to produce. They are succeeding, and the team has been winning games. And so, winning is the best deodorant, right? That's what everyone always says. And right now, like, they're winning more than they're losing. And these guys are bringing up, these guys that, like, we've been critical of at certain points, are producing. Victor Arvidsson, had a really slow start, but has been one of their better players when in the lineup. Steve's has been very good. Like it's very funny how, we kind of said, there's a lot on Marco's plate. First year head coach. This roster's not that deep. Scoring's going to be a challenge, blah, blah, blah. And, like, he's been probably the best, he's been the best guy to read who's going to go where and how am I going to get the most out of them. Like, he's nailed it. He's nailed it with everyone he's put in spots. Like, it's just that Midas touch is very, very interesting to me, that he's been able to squeeze every ounce of juice out of this roster, it feels like.
Yeah, and you look at just how much, especially a guy like Steeves, has helped out this team, but also, like, maybe what long term it could be. I'm not sure if he is a 20-goal guy, but he's looking the pot right now, right? Like, you're looking
Mhm.
at what I've said last season going into this year. If this is a team that is retooling, like, one of the priorities for this group has to be just identifying the players that are going to be part of the core moving forward, right? The guy that once the Haggens and the younger players show up, who's going to be helping them out? Who are going to be put into key spots? Like you saw last year, Morgan Geekie fit that role. And he's been even better this year. That's a guy that's part of this group moving forward. I think you look at Zadorov's part of that spot now. You're looking at, obviously, you had a guy like Zaka, right? Who clearly, I think, if they're going to keep him long term, is going to be part of that equation. Fraser Minton is going to lock down the 3C spot. If, like, Steeves can be like a middle 6 guy for you that has kind of found money, you'll definitely take that. I mean, you look at just the way he played here. It's not like it's been fluky goals or it's like an insane shooting percentage. It's like the guy skates his ass off. He's forechecking. He's making plays happen. The puck is kind of following him. Like, he had 2 points on Thursday. I feel like you could have had like 3 or 4. Like, that line with him, Geekie, and Lindholm were pantsing the Blues on just about
Mhm.
every shift out there. I mean, it was, I think both you and I tweeted separately, they look like the Bergeron, Marchand, Pasternak line, because they were just completely controlling play. The Blues couldn't get the puck out. And it wasn't like they were just, like, firing passes in no man's land. Like, they were, Steeves was a monster on the forecheck. He starts Geekie's goal because he gets the puck loose from Broberg and 6'6" Colton Parayko. Like, Steve's not the
Yeah.
biggest dude in the world, and it's just him skating his ass off, forcing that turnover that caused these things. And we were joking yesterday. It's you look at a guy like Elias Lindholm, and I think we agree he's a good player. Is he a top, top line center? Probably not. Is he a play driver per se? Maybe not. But the whole kind of narrative with him was like, well, if you put him with Pasternak, you don't have to really worry about it. He's going to be like a 60, 70 point guy. Who knew the mixing equation was not Pasternak? It was Alex Steeves, because Elias Lindholm's come back from injury. He's got like 7 points in his last 4 games. So maybe it all works out.
Yeah, exactly. And we kind of joked about how Morgan Geekie had to play with David Pasternak, right? Like that's what we all assumed. And okay, what if Morgan Geekie can make the next Morgan Geekie productive, right? Like, what if he can bring guys like Steeves and, to your point, Lindholm along, right? And if he's doing that, then you're a better team, because you don't have to rely on that combo and keeping that Geekie Pasternak combo together. And so I feel like that's something where I think it's maybe, like, that's what's probably most encouraging about David Pastrnak being out right now. You want him back. He's a top 5 player in the NHL. You want him back. But in the meantime, this is a great way to find out what Geeky can do for a team, right? And if he can bring those guys along, and I do feel like he's brought them along. Like, I feel like Elias Lindholm has a lot of quiet nights. And by quiet nights, I don't mean like bad nights. I just mean nights where you're kind of like, he's not really popping, but you put him with Geeky and he's going to have 2 assists by the end of the night. Last night, I think he had 3 assists. I think he had 3
He
assists
did.
in the game. And I'm not going to say like he wasn't completely noticeable or he wasn't effective, but I didn't walk away from that game going, Lindholm must have 3 assists.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that way. And so it's really interesting the way that he can kind of juice up the opposition. And he's just so talented and he's so versatile in how he scores goals and creates goals. And right now he's making his line mates better without David Pastrnak. That's usually Pastrnak's job.
Yeah.
But if Geeky is doing that now and you're getting legit returns out of guys like Steeves and Lindholm, and I'm not saying Lindholm's been bad again, but like you feel like you're getting really good results. And it does feel like Geeky's been more of a driver, not just Lindholm. It's been Geeky as well. And the Bruins are really reaping the rewards right now.
Yeah, and I think when you look at other guys who stepped up in this game, a bounce back performance, guy that you needed to play at a high level, I think Jonas Korpisalo is right in that mix as well, right? A guy that I think we've been pretty critical of as far as you look at, it's been the Jeremy Swayman show for about a month now, and what this team needs is during those moments where Swayman has a stinker or two, right? You need a guy that can stop the bleeding, can kind of right the ship. That's what you're paying Jonas Korpisalo that much money for as a backup to do that. And credit to him, he bounced back, right? Had 37 saves. It's unfortunate that one of the goals he gives up is like 2 seconds after probably his best save of the night with that pad save against Holloway. But I think when you look at what Korpisalo did last night, a step in the right direction for him, right? Because again, you look at the production, you look at how well guys down in Providence are playing in net. He's not operating with a whole lot of margin for error, I would probably say. And I think he did a pretty good case for himself as far as what he did on Thursday night.
Yeah, 100%. And you needed it, right? Like his first win since November 6th. It is a guy they're going to have to lean on, right? Like we talked about this last week. Like you can't just ride Swayman forever. If you go back to the start of the month of November, Swayman played, I think, the 3rd or 4th most starts in the NHL. Like not sustainable because you want to save some bullets in the chamber for the stretch run, right? If this team is going to be in and out like they are right now, you need to save some bullets. You need to ride him for 13 straight games in, say, March and April, not in November, December. That's just not good for anybody. So Korpisalo, that was a big start for him. And, I think it's encouraging, too, that game in Detroit was a lost game, but it allowed him to get in the goal without really having any sort of expectations on it. I thought it was interesting, too, after that game in Detroit. Like, Marco he didn't outright say it, but he was basically saying, like, we're not pulling Swayman because Swayman's playing bad. He's like, I'm just looking for something right there. And he's looking for a spark from his team. But I think he's also looking to get Korpisalo some low leverage, kind of work here where it's like, just get in rhythm. It's been hard. Not a lot of practice time, not a lot of game reps for you. Just try to get in rhythm here. Get comfy in your game. And I thought he actually, in a game where nobody really played all that well, his 16 minutes of hockey, I thought was like pretty good, and it's a relief outing. I understand that, but it's kind of like when a pitcher gets rocked, right? And then you're like, all right, maybe we put him in, we have a 4-run lead instead of a 1-run lead and the game's on the line. That's what it kind of felt like on Tuesday in Detroit for Korpisalo. And he comes out, he had a great game. I mean, even the second goal he gives up, right? Like he makes an amazing save before they score that goal. And, that's a sign that like your goalie's feeling it, right? When it takes a monumental save and then the third chance immediately after for that to beat him, that's when you're having a good game.
Yeah, absolutely. So good to see Korpisalo bounce back. And again, it feels like Stern was pushing all the right buttons there as far as managing this roster. We're going to talk, Ty, a little bit about the Bruins' former head coach and Jim Montgomery. But before we do that, let's take a quick break here from our good friends over at Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's the holiday season, the best time of the year for sports, bowl games, basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening at once. And while you and I are out here making decisions every day, what gifts to buy, what to eat, which game to watch, there is one place where it feels good to be right, and that's Prize Picks. There's plenty of new faces in New England, but it looks like names like Milton Williams, Stephon Diggs, and Travion Henderson are heating up as we get into some colder weather. If you want to make your pick on which players are about to go off on the gridiron, you got to go with Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. On Prize Picks, how you play is up to you. If you want flexibility, choose the flex play, where you can get paid even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And if you want the biggest payout, go for the power play. No matter your play, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test. Prize Picks now has early payouts. If your lineup gets off to a hot start, you may now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. Is your season already over? Ty, my team is friggin' cooked. It's not great. It's not good right now. But with Prize Picks, I don't have to wait until next year's draft. Prize Picks lets you play fantasy football every week, pick your favorite players, and win when they hit their projections every week. No draft required. And it's not just football. On Prize Picks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports. Combine your favorite football players with players from basketball, hockey, esports, and much more. There's no shortage of ways to participate in Prize Picks. This week, I'm looking at the board. I'm going to cover all my bases. I've got Jaylen Brown for more than 30 points, and I'm all in on Ashton Genty against Denver. I'm taking the Rook for more than 2 touchdowns because I want the Broncos to lose. That is what I'm going with there. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the Prize Picks app to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Shout out once again to our good friends over at Prize Picks. Ty, Jim Montgomery was back yesterday, and the Blues did not look good. To your point of what you said before at the start of this podcast, the Blues kind of looked a lot like the Bruins were last year, right? Where kind of treading water, not really having an identity, not buttoning up their operations, their execution. It is kind of staggering when you look at just, a year plus past that those fortunes have kind of shifted for a team. And again, I'm not saying the Bruins this year are going to the Cup or they're a legitimate contender, but I think the one thing you kind of hang your hat on with this team, and whether it's the buy-in from the players, Sturm's messaging, it feels like this Bruins team at least has an identity, right? I think every single game they go into knowing how they need to play. Like even if they don't have their A game or their B game, they know like kind of what principles they have to stick to have success. That felt like it wasn't the case last year for the Bruins. I think even Hampus Lindholm said that they didn't have an identity last year. And I think you're kind of seeing the same thing play out with the Blues this season. So it's funny how that works.
Yeah, I think that, even down to the terse, post game where it's 58 seconds of him not really wanting to say anything. And it's, listen, I don't think he's a bad guy, right? Like, I don't think Jim Montgomery is a bad guy to have behind an NHL bench if your team is looking for a spark. I don't think he's a wartime general, though. I don't think he's the guy that's going to guide you through a 4-round run where you have to outfox the opposition. I felt that became obvious in 2023. It became even more apparent in 2024. And then when I just think one of his greatest mistakes is that he spent 82 games going, oh, I don't got a coach. I got Bergeron back there. And then when he had a coach, you're like, oh shit, he might not have to coach. He might not know how to coach. And I don't mean that like he's an idiot way. I mean that in like sometimes you're gonna have to outfox the opposition. And I never felt like Montgomery really understood that. He was just throw the pucks out there, have good vibes, and you're gonna win the game. I don't, and then I thought it was telling too last year when Nikita Zadorov signs a $30 million contract to come here and be a Boston Bruin, and he talks to guys he knows in the league before signing here, asks about Montgomery, and they fire Montgomery and and then Zadorov does an interview in Russia where he says, I never saw the version of Jim Montgomery that players told me about. Like, that's damning, right? That's not just media saying it. That's a player saying it, that I never saw the guy that everyone told me I was going to see, and it was obvious. There were things that were not going well. Like I can tell you, and I've reported before, like he wanted big money and he wanted more say and he wanted more, security, I would say, for lack of a better word. And the Bruins at the point where, what I can tell you is this. Montgomery's camp felt lowballed by the contract offers that the Bruins were putting forth. The Bruins felt like Montgomery was taking them for a ride. At a certain point, they felt like he was no longer negotiating in good faith. And then they also felt like they were, I think deep down, the Bruins were a little worried about, okay, what if we give him 82 games to figure this out? What if he does, right? We don't want a cup, but we get in the playoffs, right? And now he's going to take us for a ride and have a bidding war. He's going to be Barry Trotz going from Nashville to the island, or sorry, the Capitals to the island. And now we're going to be left holding the bag, and we might lose Joe Sacco too without ever having seen him as a head coach. Like, there were so many moving parts to it, but it became so toxic and weird. And ultimately it came back to Jim Montgomery did not get enough out of this roster. Now, the Blues are not a good roster, but are they getting the most out of that roster right now? Look at up and down that team. It's hard to find any guy that's going above and beyond right now where they should be at a level as a player in this league.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it makes for just an interesting retrospective, right, of just what all the ups and downs of what his tenure was, right? Of essentially two seasons and 2 months, right? Not even 2 months. But for a guy that had such high highs where this was part of a record-setting team that, again, I don't know how much that you put on him. And I think at the start of the year, like, the change of pace between Cassidy to him, I think it was probably a breath of fresh air, right? Guys were already, I think, motivated with it being the last dance for Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. So the vibes were high, and I think he helps out with that. But then, to your point, when you need a guy that can be a tactician going up against Paul Maurice, who's really friggin' good at it, knows how to work the press conferences, knows how to dial up like what his team needs to do night in and night out. You saw it get exposed. I was doing a few podcasts with some media in St. Louis in the lead up to this game, and you kind of like, I wanted to brush back up on just kind of the sequence of events that led to that first round exit. Yikes, dude. Like, you almost kind of forget, because I think whether it's just you block it out of memory because of how traumatic that playoff series was, or because it was going so fast once you get into those playoff series that you're so dialed in that you forget like how many train crashes there were as part of just that overall sequence that led to Carter Verhaeghe's goal in Game 7, right? Like,
Oh
you look
yeah.
at playing Ullmark for all those games where he's clearly banged up, not pulling Ullmark after he gave up, 3 goals pretty early on in Game 6, sticking with them there, putting in Clifton for Grzelcyk in Game 6, where Clifton comes in and love the guy, but had like 2 or 3 passes that directly led to goals like within 4 seconds, like critical turnovers, splitting up Bergeron and Marchand. Like, man, you want to put some of the blame, obviously, on the players for not executing. We get it, right? But, like, Jesus, not great, man. And then you look at, you carry that over to this past year, and listen, a lot went wrong for the Bruins in 24-25. And again, a lot of that also falls on the players themselves, but they couldn't even get out of the death spiral they were more or less in. And it feels like that was also a byproduct of just the weird vibes. Training camp sucked. You had this uncertainty about like Montgomery's contract, and you feel like no one was righting the ship there. And by the time that the Bruins moved on, like, I feel like the nail was already in the coffin. It's like, and I wonder if all those things factor into it as to why he got like a quick little video thing, and that's all it was yesterday. It makes for an interesting look back into just what his time here in Boston really was.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wrote this back in 2023. So this isn't revisionist history in terms of like he's fired now and now we're going to grave dance. Like, no, like when they lost in 2023, there were so many things that went wrong, but I kept coming back to the coaching. Not really adjusting before it was too late. The players understand that like they're going to get popped in the mouth, right? And I did talk to players who said like, yeah, when we got popped, it was hard to recalibrate because we hadn't been popped in so long. That's when you need coaching to come in. Like, you're up 3-1. Ullmark is hurting. You got Swayman there. Like, that's a great opportunity to get Swayman in there and try to close out a series and buy some more time, buy some more rest. Bergeron, like you could have given him another day to try to recuperate instead, especially given how Zaka and Coyle had been playing, like they were delivering, and just he had no feel for the team that he just coached for 82 games. It was so bizarre. It was like the playoffs were his first time behind the bench where he had to actually coach, and he looked so overwhelmed. And he is a David Pastrnak and Hampus Lindholm great Game 7 away from being the only coach in league history to blow a 3-1 series lead in back-to-back years. I mean, that is just, it's ridiculous. It's too much. That's too insane of a thing to have maybe have on your record. And I understand that, that can be the case for Claude Julien, right? Claude Julien could have been done in 2011 if Nathan Horton doesn't score in Game 5 and Game 7 overtimes. But you saw things that he adjusted along the way that made those moot points. Like you never saw that with Montgomery. I remember our biggest criticisms of him the second year were that he was still coaching as if he had the team that he had in 22-23, which was not the same at all. The team he had in 23-24 and then 24-25. Like, and again, it all comes back to what we're talking about: the failure to adjust, the failure to recalibrate, the failure to get your team going in a different direction that it needs to go to be the best team possible. And I'm seeing that with St. Louis. You look at St. Louis, like I was joking about this. St. Louis is AI slop. It has no soul, no identity, no feel, nothing that you look at and go, oh, I know what they're going for here. It's like Doug Armstrong typed in, make me a team that is big, but also kind of fast.
We also want a golden retriever doing 6'7" in a Blues jersey too. We want that as part of the AI algorithm.
Right, like it's just like it's not a team that makes it a damn lick of sense. You watch them, I just don't know what they're doing. I don't know what kind of identity they want to have, and that's what I felt like about Montgomery. Outside of the 22-23 team, I didn't know what the identity that they wanted to have was. It's, and I had players that were telling me different things based on, like, hey, like, hey, coaching staff says this, but like, I feel like we should probably try this. And I'm in my head, I'm like, why are you telling me this? Like, I'm not the coaching staff. Why are you telling me? Yeah, I don't really agree with that, but like, yeah, I guess we're going to try it. Like, I'm like, okay. I mean, well, that's kind of weird. And so I just felt like, listen, I don't know if Marco's going to win a playoff round. I don't know. Right. And Jim Montgomery won one playoff round in his 2 years here, 2 full seasons here. But I feel like Marco has the right identity and the right personality type for what this team is going to try to be. This team is going to be underdog. This Bruins team is going to be an underdog no matter who they go against in round 1. Even if the Bruins win the freaking division, they're going to begin round 1 being like, well, it's kind of have a horseshoe up their ass all year. Can they really win a playoff series? Marco has the right intensity, the right emotional, heaviness, the heavy-handedness. He's a bit of a hard ass, but he's also a player. So like, it kind of reminds me of Rabel in that regard. I think we said this on this podcast before, but like, it reminds me of Mike Rabel, where it's like, it's tough love at times, but it's like the players know, like, oh, this guy was playing 7 years ago or 8 years ago. Like, he knows like what it's going to take and what I got to do. Like, I think those things do matter. Right. And I just feel like that connectivity, being a younger guy, coaching in the minors for a while, like that's going to help these players because they're going to be underdogs, and he's going to be the right guy to rattle cages, where I think the vibes thing only works for so long with a guy like Jim Montgomery.
Yep. No, absolutely. So an interesting legacy, if you want to call it legacy, interesting tenure here in Boston. Maybe tenure, right?
I wouldn't have given, I mean, I'm probably a dick for saying this. I wouldn't even have given him the welcome back thing. I wouldn't have. I just, colossal failure. His tenure is defined by colossal failure. They blew a series, being up 3-1 with an all-time team. They're laughed at forever, because you win 65 games, but you're out in 13 days. It's you come up short there. Yes, you win the round in 2024, but you're not the first head coach to beat Toronto in 7 games on Boston ice, and so I don't want to give him too much credit for that. Unfortunately, I just don't. And then he leaves last year. He's disconnected, it felt like, all year, and people outside the market were noticing that. And then he has a job in St. Louis 5 days later. And then he takes the press conference to St. Louis and says, once a Blue, always a Blue. If I'm the Bruins, I'm like, dude, what? Like, I'm a little pissed off knowing that my coach was, not really, I don't want to say he didn't care about getting fired, but it's kind of like he knew he had a job if he got fired. And I think you look back on some of the things that happened that third and final season here in town, and your eyebrows kind of raised a little bit based on A, how it ended, and B, how quickly he turned around and was basically happy to turn around and be in St. Louis. And so I'm not going to begrudge anybody for acknowledging, but I probably wouldn't have done that because I feel like I would have been like, nah, you kind of checked out on us a year ago. I don't really think we should honor you in any fashion.
Yep. No, it makes for an interesting little tenure he had here. I agree. And again, the Bruins will have a chance to deliver another loss to the Blues next week down in St. Louis as well. So we'll see what plays out there. We'll see if the Blues can bounce back.
I just feel like Rajon Rondo when he was talking about Isaiah Thomas and he was like, "Oh, we celebrate that now." That's like kind of what I felt like. Where like we're giving video nods to a guy who won a playoff round. Like, all right, Johnny Beecher's coming back in January. We got a video lined up for Johnny Beecher, or are you an Original Six franchise that wants to win championships? That's just how I feel.
I was gonna say also, to your point earlier, Hampus Lindholm and David Pastrnak won that Toronto series, and Jeremy Swayman. Those are three guys that won that playoff series. So,
think about how quickly he could have torpedoed Morgan Geekie, right? Like we're talking about how good Morgan Geekie's been, right? Like he was dangerously close to like torpedoing that guy where he scratched him in the early part of the year last year and
5 times.
Yeah. And we asked him, what does he got to do to get back in the lineup? He's like, play better. It's like, okay, well, that's not helpful. That's not exactly what you want to do, right? And then Sacco, I mean, it's so weird to think that Joe Sacco, who was not a great head coach here, was trying the best he could, but didn't have enough to like make up for what they lacked talent wise. Joe Sacco might be the guy to credit for Morgan Geekie being this incredible franchise player for the Boston Bruins, where Sacco was the one who put him with Zacha and Pastrnak, despite it being his off wing. And there you go. It was off to the races, right? Like, it's the same. It's kind of the same logic that I go back to when the Bruins were interested in Quinn. And I was like, nah, I'm good. And everyone's like, well, what? He doesn't deserve a second chance. And I'm like, no. And everyone's like, why not? I'm like, because he couldn't tell that if it was Shesterkin or Georgiev, who was the better goalie. I don't know if I want that guy's brain behind the bench right now. Like I'd rather have someone who knows what talent they're evaluating. It kind of felt like, Geekie was an example of Montgomery's shortcomings as a talent evaluator.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Geekie and I think the Bruins are a whole lot better off now with Mako Sturm on the bench. Ty, before we let you go, where can we read your stuff? Where can we hear you on the airwaves? All that good stuff.
You can find me at 985sportshub.com and on the air 985 Sports Hub every Saturday morning, 9 to 11 a.m. Tomorrow we should have the full crew in, which I think first time since like opening weekend, honestly. Myself, Bob Beers, and Ryan Johnston. Always good to have those guys in studio. Prevents me from having to do monologue radio, which is not something I particularly love doing because I feel like I don't know. I just feel like it's a weird late night talk show. Anyways, that's where you can find me. How about yourself?
Yeah, you can read my stuff on Boston.com and the Boston Globe. We've covered every step of the way this Bruins season. We got recaps, features, columns, breakdowns, analysis, all that good stuff. So please subscribe over there on those two sites. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever it's called these days, you can at Conor Ryan _93. Ty, thank you for joining us. Again, want to give a shout out to the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel. We're part of the CLNS Media Network. Again, pretty much daily content between Poke the Bear, Bruins Beat with Evan Marinofski, Pucks with Haggs. We haven't covered every step of the way this Bruins season, so following along with us over on YouTube. And it's not just Bruins hockey as part of the CLNS Media Network. You've got Patriots Press Pass, Celtics All Access, the whole crew over at the CLNS Media Network does a great job keeping you up to date, informed on both the Patriots and the Celtics, two teams that are also playing at a high level right now. It's an exciting time of the year, and CLNS has you covered every step of the way. Again, also want to give a shout out to Prize Picks, the best way to win cash this football season. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 on lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 on lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. My name is Conor Ryan. That is Ty Anderson. This was episode 383 of Poke the Bear. You fans have a great rest of your week.